You were let go by Viking, is that correct?
Yeah, 3 years I was there.
How is the ending process? Go on.
Well,
Go on.
It's normally a late night phone call. If you've seen those movies where the guy from the mafia gets called and he's got to go in and he knows he's getting killed, it's one of them.
Hi and welcome to Coaching Session. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Jamaica's assistant coach, Ian Burchnall. Ian, welcome.
Hi, thanks a lot. Good to be here.
So Ian, you've been to many different clubs in different roles as head coach, as assistant coach, but I want to take you right back to the very beginning where it started at Leeds University. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that kind of journey started when I was around 20, 21. I was up at university, initially studying and as a player in the university side. Combined with that, I did some work with the football in the community programme at Leeds United, which was like a good intro into like just basic coaching really with kids. And then after I graduated, I took the job as the head performance coach at the University of Leeds, where I stayed for about 7 years. So it's a great place for me to cut my teeth coaching. And like many young coaches, you have to take a lot of different jobs just to kind of make your income up so that you can get by.
What did the schedule look like for you?
Yeah, it's tricky with university football because obviously the students come back around September and then they get quite decent holidays if you're a student. So you get a long time at Christmas, long time at Easter, and then a long summer. So the season's fairly short. You normally train 2 nights a week, play British university games on a Wednesday, and then you'd have some like regional games on a Saturday. But obviously the better players are often playing semi-pro on a Saturday. So you probably lose them for that. But you might get around 20 games a season, I think, with the university lads and plenty of time on the grass.
Okay, so it's a great place to go and learn. Did it require you to have any UEFA badges at the time to get that job? Or were you able to get that job and then start the badges process?
Yeah, I'd say like university football, it's not like the EPPP it's not so stringent with what you actually have to have paperwork-wise. So I started UEFA B when I was about 22, 23. So it was perfect really for me to have access to university football, like decent level of players, 11 versus 11, good facilities. So everything that you need for the B licence, really, you could work with in that environment.
So from Leeds University, you took an unusual step to then be assistant coach in Norway with Sarpsborg. Talk us through that. How does someone go from Leeds University to Norway?
Yeah, so the last year or two that I was at the university, I was introduced to Brian Dean. Brian Dean, obviously former player in the Premier League, and he'd retired a few years before and was looking to get into coaching. And he was doing his badges, and he needed somewhere where he could access like players and gain some experience and cut his teeth on the grass. And we had 2 really good years actually. We won the British University's title that year. And I think Brian just enjoyed the process of being around it. So he then moved into management and was presented as manager of Sarpsborg, which was a small club, but newly promoted for the first time to the top league in Norway. And he just said, look, I'd like you to come and work on the grass. He'd obviously seen me work. So for me, I was 29 and the opportunity to move into like full-time senior professional football in a decent league was like a great step for me. So yeah, I went out there and then assisted him, and we stayed at the club for 2 years.
It's amazing because I hear so many young coaches and players actually speaking about it's more often who you know, not what you know. And in this case, that has proven. But what I want to highlight is the fact that you took 7 years out of your time at Leeds University and in academy football at Leeds alongside it in order to get the opportunity. Once you were there, how was the experience? You know, as an assistant coach, what was your role?
For me, it was so important that Brian had seen the level that I could work at and that he respected that. And so that all came from the years before, like you say, of preparing myself for that. And I think if you do the right things over and over and over, eventually you're going to meet some people that can help you open the right doors, because it is about people opening the doors. And for me, I'd been coaching for 7 or 8 years. And Brian had only been coaching really for a couple of years. So actually my experience on the grass was deeper than his, although he had a much better understanding of what professional footballers go through, like emotional things and feeling and things like that, because he'd been a top pro for 20 years. Transferring that to the grass was where he now had to like work at, whereas he knew that I could deliver a lot of the things that he want. So when I went there, my primary work was to plan, design, and implement all of the training process. And Brian obviously wanted to oversee that, so he had his ideas on how we should play, and then it was up for me to transfer that to the players via coaching. So it was great for me because Brian essentially would take the heat from from being the manager, and I got to do all of the good bits, which was like be on the grass. I could make mistakes on the grass. It was a perfect scenario for me as a young coach to be able to go in, really be given a lot of responsibility for how the team plays and tactically how we set up, but not get blamed for it ultimately. So it was quite a good situation for me.
Yeah, I can relate, actually. I'm in a very similar role here in Iceland, and I often mention that I've been given the freedom to make mistakes, and that's part of the good side of being an assistant. And I do at one point have ambition to be a head coach, and that's my next question for you. It was in Norway where you then took your first role as head coach with Viking. How was that? How did it compare to being an assistant? And now you're the one now in the firing line.
One thing I'd say is I think it's really difficult to go from assistant to manager in the same club. Like that's quite a challenge because your relationship with the players changes a lot. Even though again in Viking I was given like massive responsibility on the grass. So from a training perspective, not a lot changed. But I took the club when it was in a really difficult spot. They were transfer embargoed and they were short on money. I was 33. That's one of the biggest clubs in Norway, and I was given that job. And probably, if they were at their peak of powers with all the money that they'd had before me was Roy Hodgson. And with all respect to myself, I don't think at my level of experience I'd have got that job unless the club was in a bit of crisis. Like I wasn't going to get a favourable situation. I was going to get a really demanding situation. So whilst it was tough, I learned an unbelievable amount about how to manage a football club. When you were in it, it felt unbelievably hard. But when I came out of it, I was kind of grateful for the learning that I got from it because I think I was able to, in some situations when I moved into other jobs and there was crisis, like I was better equipped to deal with it.
From Norway, you were let go by Viking, is that correct?
Yeah, 3 years I was there. And then at the end of my third year, I left, yeah.
So how is the ending process? So could you talk us through what that looked like? So
yeah,
go on.
Go on. It's normally a late night phone call to come into the club, and then like it's one of them. I don't know if you've seen those movies where the guy from the mafia gets called and he's got to go in and he knows he's getting killed. It's one of them. Like you get a phone call and I'm like, turned to my wife and I was like, I think I know what this is, but. It was hard because like the first time it happens, like it does hurt you. I was sore and they had told me that they knew that we were going to suffer that season. We were embargoed. We had no money. We sold the best players. It was about economic survival rather than the team surviving in the division. And they promised that they would stand by me, because they knew it was difficult. But then at the end of that season, it looked like they were going to be able to sell the stadium. They were going to get a lot of money coming back in. And obviously they felt like, okay, now we can change things up. It was a bit of a bitter pill. And I learned a little bit about what people tell you on the way in might not be what they're saying when you're going out. I went in and they just said, look, it's results and results are not strong enough. And you also have to accept that because that is where you live and die on your results. So, but yeah, the first time you get let go it's a tough one. And you have to do a lot of self-reflection after that. For me, it was like, it wasn't only leaving a football club. I left the country then because I was saying, well, what's here for the wife and kids now? Well, we're going to have to move back to England then because I can't sit in Norway with no job. So now it's back to England. So it wasn't only after 3 years of really having somewhere as your home. It's now you're leaving the club, you're leaving the country. So it's quite a big shift, really.
Did you get a chance to say goodbye to the players? How is it? Did you have to pack your office up that day? What does that look like? What does that next 24 hours look like?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, no, you just pack up and you don't say goodbye. You don't really get to say goodbye. Like when we recently, when we left Wolves, it is literally you're in one day, you get a phone call and that's it. Pack your stuff up, don't see anybody. You know, those players that you work tirelessly with every single day in your own little bubble, and you're 100 mile an hour every day, and then you get a call and one day you just drop to zero, and that's it. You know, you don't. Obviously, players reach out and you do connect with a few. And like, I went and met a few players for a coffee and I met some of the staff, but there's no big goodbyes. It's like you're out the door and they'll move on quick. So it's a tough business from that perspective. If you're going to have success, you have to build strong emotional connections with the players that you're working with, but they can get cut in a moment.
This is a harsh reality of football, and it happens to coaches every day. We see it happening in the Premier League. We see it happening in Norway. I see it happening here in Iceland, where coaches are cut within a 24-hour period, and they're having to move home and move their family and all their belongings alongside it. So I appreciate you sharing that insight. You then went on to go and work with Ostersons, where you were a big success. And my question around that is, you know, for British coaches, do you recommend going abroad? Because that was your path. I mean, you were 2 clubs in Norway, and then you've gone on to Sweden.
Yeah, I would. Of course, it's helped me enormously. You know, 5 years in Norway, and then 2.5 years in the top league in Sweden. Like, for me as a coach, developed me like an unbelievable amount. And I felt like I had got to a point where I felt like a lot of doors were closed in England, and it was difficult to progress. And it was also, I think it can be difficult. Like, my own feeling was, having not played at the top level, I never found gaining credibility with their players any issue, because as soon as you get on the training pitch, their players want to know how you can help them. But gaining credibility at board level, getting time, getting credibility with supporters when no one's ever heard of you before. I found in England a challenge. I went to Scandinavia, and English football is quite revered. So automatically I felt like, okay, I've got a little bit of buy-in here externally. In England, it feels like if you haven't hit the ground running after 3 or 4 games, then you're already fighting against the tide a little bit. If I compare, say, the top league in Norway and Sweden to League One, for example, where I've also worked, like, it's more tactical. It's definitely more technical. It's nowhere near as physical and as fast, but it challenged a different side of my coaching. You only have 30 games a season, which means you get loads of time on the grass with the players to develop things. Whereas you go to League One, you can get up to 60 games a season. So you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. So it's a different type of coaching. But yeah, I couldn't recommend it more for British coaches to challenge themselves culturally and football-wise. It's top.
Moving on from Ostersons, where the fans even threw you a party, a leaving party, because they were so impressed with the work that you did there. You came back to England. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was a strange period. We'd had some... my wife was ready to come back from the north of Sweden, I think. So we kind of made a decision as a family to come back and get the kids in school and set up a camp back in England. So we came back, but COVID was on. So it was really difficult to get out and meet any clubs or meet any personnel. So it was actually a tricky 7 months. I'd had a couple of online interviews, and I actually spoke to the national team of Iceland. I was down to the last 2 for that job. For the Icelandic national team, which was a really interesting process. But Notts County called me and asked me if I'd go in, and I was super impressed with the owners and the football club and how they wanted to do things. So they gave me an opportunity to manage the football club. They were in the National League at the time and looking to build something. I spent the best part of 18 months at Notts County. I had 2 playoff campaigns there with them. It was maybe the right moment personally just to take a step up a couple of leagues. And then took on the Forest Green role. Forest Green was a tricky one as a head coach, because a month after the sporting director sold me a vision, he left to go to Portsmouth, and I understood it because it's football and it was a great opportunity for him. But it left me then doing a lot of things around the club, and there were so many things that weren't at League One level at that point. It felt like I was doing everything other than the stuff that I love, which was being on the grass. So I kind of stepped back and said, like, that was a really challenging experience in League One, and maybe I just need to go back to the bit that I love, which is being on the grass. And I also felt like I needed that exposure at being at a club at the top level, because I'd worked in top league in Norway and Sweden and then lower league in England. And I felt like maybe working with top international players was the next step for me. But I knew I wasn't going to get that as a manager. So assistant was a smart place to go. So Anderlecht had actually called me to see what my situation was whilst I was at Forest Green. But I wanted to try to make it work at Forest Green. So I'd said no to them. Brian Reamer had gone in as manager, who was assistant to Thomas Frank. And I knew the sporting director well from Scandinavia. And they'd rang me because they really wanted an assistant who could deliver on the grass. So, I was in Forest Green and I said no to them. But then Forest Green sacked me. And they picked the phone back up and said, just out of interest, would this now be interesting for you? So I was like, look, what an opportunity. My first games were playing in Europe against Villarreal, home and away, and we won and went through to the last 16 in Europe. So to the quarterfinals, in Europe. So to get sacked from Forest Green and a few weeks later beat Villarreal away was quite surreal, really.
Some journey.
Yeah, so that was great. And Anderlecht's an amazing football club, and it is such a powerhouse in Belgian football. It's so historic. So you almost felt like you were part of something really, really big. So I found it easy to go back because I just had a tough 8-9 months as a manager, and I was like, need a break from being a manager. I'll let someone else. I'll just help someone else. But I also felt like I'd be a better assistant having had that experience, because I know how lonely it can be and I know how tough it can be. So to be able to empathise with that as an assistant and then try to support. But then Gary went into Wolves and I got a phone call just asking if I'd be interested in coming back to England and Wolves. It was a difficult one because I was so enjoying Anderlecht. But I talked to the manager and I talked to the sporting director, and they said, Ian, you have to go. If it's the Premier League, it's an amazing opportunity and we just support you 100%. So Anderlecht were class. And so, then I went across and got the opportunity to work with Gaz and work in the Premier League. And again, just from a coaching perspective, a massive learning experience.
How challenging was the Premier League?
Yeah, it's different because it's such a huge operation. Compared to lower down, the volume of people that are involved, the amount of staff, the amount of detail you can go into, it's phenomenal. And of course, the level of the players is so high. But you still get a lot of the same problems that you'll get in other clubs. You'll get players that are sometimes late, sometimes struggling for motivation. I think in the Premier League, the level of coaching is so high. If you get it wrong, you really get exposed. If you make a wrong call with a team, it can, it gets highlighted straight away. There's no room for error. The quality of players that you play against are so high, and things happen on the pitch so fast that it's like everything on fast forward.
Now that brings us to where you're at today. You're working as assistant coach for the Jamaican national team with Steve McLaren. How is that? How different is working in international football to your everyday football in the Premier League?
Yeah, it's definitely different. And it's something I've never experienced international football. So Steve called me maybe about 6 weeks ago and just said, look, if you're not back in, I really, really need somebody to come and work with me on the grass. They've got World Cup qualifiers in September, October, November, and it would be great to have you as part of the team and come and help us out in Jamaica. So, it's quite an attractive proposition, really. The Caribbean for a couple of weeks and get to coach, but the level of players is really good. A lot of championships and Premier League players playing in MLS. It was a chance for me to get back on the grass, which is the first time since Wolves, and it is different because you're getting a group of players that are actually different levels, because some were playing in the Jamaican League, some were playing in the Premier League. You've got to piece them together. You've got to tactically prepare them with only 3 or 4 days. Some are playing, some have been sat on the bench. They're all at slightly different levels. They're all being told different things at clubs. Some are being told to play more direct. Some are building up from the back. So you kind of got to find something that works for everybody with that group of players. And you've got 3 days on the grass to get it right before your game. So I do sessions every single day in club football. Now I have like 3 weeks to prepare 3 sessions, and you've got to make sure all 3 sessions are absolutely perfect, because if you don't get them right, there's not much room for error. For me to go and work with Steve with his level of experience, you know, he's been a top manager, top international manager, assistant to Sir Alex Ferguson. So to just draw down on some of his experience as well has been brilliant.
Right, Ian, let's get down to it. Tell me about your session.
Yeah, so it's a crossing and finishing exercise. Yeah. A lot of different component parts, 2 goals, so the ball's going to flow both ways and create lots of different attacking situations. So the ball will start in with the midfielder who work on his switch of play, and then we'll get a 1v1 in this wide area. At the same time, a coach is going to feed a midfielder here at the other end, and the number 9 is going to try and make a curved run in behind the mannequins and finish one-on-one with a goalie. So at one end we get wide area 1v1 with 3v2 in the box, and at the other end we'll get an unopposed finish. As soon as that's happened, another ball will get fed in, and the ball will get flipped to the far post. So we work on like crosses from the half space to make 3v2 at the far post. As soon as that's happened, we'll get a ball switched from the other midfielder, and we get like a corridor run from the number 8 to a finish. And whilst that's happening, another ball goes in and we get a 3 against 3 in the final third at the other end. And then the last bit is a switch of play and a combination play with a fullback, little 1-2 and a wide area cross. So it sounds complicated. There's a lot going on from start to finish, and it takes a little bit of explaining. But once it starts to flow, I think you can really dig into some individual detail, and each player gets something for their position specific. So you get 1v1s in wide areas, switches of play from midfielders, 3v2 attacking. Obviously, the defenders get to work on a little bit of defending crosses as well. So it touches a lot of different areas that you probably want to get as a coach, all incorporated into one part of the session.
So you've got 5 phases of play there, right? How will you explain that to the players? Would you bring a whiteboard out? Would you just say it, or would you do a walkthrough? How would you best explain
so it'd be a
walkthrough,
really. So we'd obviously get them all. You can see on my slide here that there's 4 coaches active within this. So there's 4 coaches positioned around. Obviously, we were at the luxury of having 4 coaches that can supply and understand the session, so they can keep it flowing. But I think once the players have seen it once or twice, they start to flow more naturally. Because really, for JJ here in the wide area, his role is 1v1 with a cross. Tommy Doyle's role is to flip half space and then put a ball into the corridor. So like they only have 1 or 2 actions each. So as long as they can focus on successfully doing their actions, the whole thing will flow. And obviously the balls are fed in initially from the coaches. So, ball fed in from the coach here. On this one, the ball's fed in from the coach, so we can control the timing a little bit, which makes it easier to flow. But yeah, it definitely for something like this would need a couple of run throughs. Not be afraid that it looks a bit scruffy on the first couple, and that the players will get it a bit wrong. But once they get it right, it's a really dynamic session that can flow.
Great, thanks for sharing such an insightful session. Really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure, mate.
If you enjoyed this episode of Coaching Session, please hit the like and subscribe button and drop any comments below. Look forward to seeing you next time.